Between the 8th and 12th centuries, in eastern India, a powerful empire rose. An empire that ended chaos, revived Buddhism, and clashed with three great powers for Kannauj, the Palas, the Gurjara Pratiharas, and the Rashtrakutas. But the question is, did this same expansion become the reason for their decline? And an even bigger question, did an empire that became the center of knowledge and religion ultimately lose in the politics of power? If you watched our previous video, then you saw how the Devgiri Yadav dynasty established its strength in South India, how they built a powerful kingdom, and then slowly, external invasions and internal weaknesses destroyed them. Till now in this series, we have understood the powers of North India, Central India, and South India. But now the story turns towards Eastern India, where from chaos rises an empire, which changes history not just through the sword, but through ideas, religion, and strategy. This is the story of the Pala dynasty. At the end of the 7th century, when Harshvardhana died, the stability of North India died with him. There was no clear successor. And this is the biggest weakness of any great empire, power vacuum. When a strong center collapses, smaller powers begin to rise. Everyone wants power, but no one is able to give stability. This is exactly what happened in North India. The entire region broke into small kingdoms, where every ruler considered himself the greatest. But none could control the whole region. Bengal and Bihar suffered the most, where the situation became so bad that it was called Matsya Nyaya, meaning the big fish eats the small fish. Villages were being looted, local chiefs were constantly fighting each other. There was no central authority, no law, and common people were completely unsafe. History teaches us that when instability increases, people stop wanting freedom, they start wanting stability. In such times, the mindset of society changes. People do not want democracy, they want strong leadership. And this mindset leads to a major historical decision. Around 750 CE, the major chiefs and people of Bengal together selected one man to become king. His name was Gopala. Notice this carefully, he was not a hereditary king, he was a chosen ruler. In Indian history, where most dynasties came to power by birth, the Pala dynasty itself began through selection-based legitimacy. Now the biggest question is, what was so special about Gopala that in a time of chaos, every major power accepted him? Gopala was not just a warrior, he was an organizer, a stabilizer. His thought process was simple but powerful. First order, then expansion. And this is what made him different from other rulers. After taking power, what did he do first? Not endless wars, but internal control. He brought smaller chiefs under his authority, some through alliance, some through force. This strategy was risky, but effective. Gopala organized the administration, created local control, and slowly stability returned to Bengal. This did not happen overnight. It was a gradual process. Slowly, chaotic Bengal started transforming into a stable kingdom. And this is where the real strength of the Pala dynasty begins to appear. Now another important point, Gopala did not focus much on expansion. Why? Because he understood if the foundation is weak, the empire will not survive. This is the same mistake many rulers make, rapid expansion, but weak control. Gopala did not make this mistake. But history never remains static. At the same time, other great powers were also rising in different parts of India. In the west, the Gurjara Pratiharas, and in the southwest, the Rashtrakutas. These were not just regional powers. They were empires with massive ambitions. And all three powers had their eyes on one target, Kannauj. Kannauj was not just a city. It was the symbol of political legitimacy in North India. Whoever controlled Kannauj could call himself the ruler of North India. This was not just geography, it was prestige, trade routes, and strategic control. In other words, Kannauj is equal to power plus status plus recognition. And this was about to become the most dangerous power struggle in Indian history. But to enter this game, the Pala dynasty needed a ruler who was ready to take risks. Gopala had laid the foundation, but he was not an aggressive expansionist. Now the question was, would the next ruler be the same? Or would the story completely change? And here comes the first major turning point. After Gopala, power passes to his son, Dharmapala. Now understand this carefully. This is where the strategy of the Pala dynasty changes, where Gopala's focus was stability. Dharmapala's focus was going to become expansion plus dominance. But was this change correct? Or would this become the biggest mistake later? From here, the story becomes deeper and far more dangerous. Now the story moves forward from the point where a stable foundation had already been prepared. But now the real game was about to begin. After Gopala, power passes to Dharmapala. And this is where the direction of the Pala dynasty changes, where Gopala focused on stability. Dharmapala's vision was dominance. It is very important to understand that Dharmapala did not just want to protect his father's legacy, he wanted to expand it. And not just expand it, he wanted to become the greatest power in North India. But one question, where did he begin? The answer, Kannauj. And this is why three powers were colliding over the same target, the Palas, the Gurjara Pratiharas, and the Rashtrakutas. This conflict became known in history as the tripartite struggle. From here, the story is no longer just about war, but about strategy, timing, and patience. When Dharmapala moved towards Kannauj, this was not just expansion, it was a calculated risk. At that time, in the west, a powerful ruler was rising, Nagbhata. And from the south, the Rashtrakuta power of Govinda III was slowly moving northward. All three had the same goal, but different approaches. Nagbhata II, direct military dominance. Govinda III, opportunistic timing. Dharmapala, combination of war and diplomacy. The first major clash happens, Dharmapala versus Nagbhata II. This was not just a battle, it was a clash of two visions. Dharmapala took the initiative, but Nagbhata was already prepared. The war happened, difficult and decisive. And in the end, Dharmapala had to retreat. Now many people think here, so was Dharmapala weak? No, Dharmapala learned something important. This struggle could not be won through a single battle. But the real twist was still left. While these two powers were fighting each other, at the same time a third power entered from the south, Govinda III. And what was his greatest strength? Timing. When both opponents were already weakened, he attacked. The Rashtrakuta army moved rapidly towards the north, so rapidly that no one got time to react. History tells us that Govinda III forced both the Palas and the Pratiharas to submit. Three great powers, all fighting for Kannauj, but none able to hold it permanently. This was the core reality of the entire struggle. This was not a war to win completely. It was a game of stopping others from winning. Now the most important question, what did Dharmapala do in this situation? Did he break down? Did he surrender? No. This is where his real greatness appears. He moved away from direct confrontation and adopted indirect strategy. He connected smaller kingdoms to his side, created alliances, and slowly increased influence. Then he played a masterstroke, interference in the politics of Kannauj. He removed the ruler of Kannauj and placed his own supporter there. This was not just a victory. This was a new method of control, not direct rule, but indirect dominance. It is said that Dharmapala organized a grand court at Kannauj, where many North Indian rulers accepted his authority. Just think about it. A power that rose from Bengal was now sitting at the center of North India, influencing other kings. This was not just military success, this was political intelligence. But history is never linear. This success did not last long. Nagbhata II challenged him again, and this time Dharmapala was defeated. And before the Pratiharas could take complete control, the same pattern repeated, intervention by Govinda III. The three powers collided once again. And once again no clear winner emerged. Continuous wars is equal to continuous resource drain. Dharmapala understood this. If he continued fighting endlessly, then even if he won, the empire itself would weaken. And this is where his most important decision comes. Now he no longer invested only in war. He invested in knowledge, culture, and ideology. He established Vikramashila University and also revived Nalanda University. But here comes a very important question. Why did he do this? Only for religion? No. This was also a strategic move. Knowledge and religion create soft power. When other regions respect your knowledge, your influence spreads without war. Now the story reaches its most decisive turning point, where an empire is at its height. But hidden inside that same height are the seeds of decline. After Dharmapala, power passes to Devapala. And this is where the Pala Empire reaches its peak. Devapala was not just a successor, he was a consolidator who strengthened the structure created by his father Dharmapala and also expanded it. During his reign, the Pala Empire saw its greatest geographical expansion, influence reaching the regions of Assam in the east, expansion towards parts of Odisha in the south, and up to the foothills of the Himalayas in the north. Some inscriptions even suggest that his influence spread into many parts of North India. But the most important thing here is this: Devapala's real strength was not only how much he conquered, but how much he controlled. Through constant military campaigns, he kept enemies suppressed, secured the borders, and did not allow internal rebellions to rise. In other words, expansion plus control is equal to stability. At the same time, he continued the tradition that had become the identity of the Pala dynasty, protection of knowledge and Buddhism through institutions like Nalanda and Vikramashila. Vikramashila University and Nalanda University received even greater support during his reign. Foreign monks and scholars started coming here, and Eastern India once again became a global center of knowledge. But history has one rule: every peak also carries the beginning of decline. After Devapala begins the most critical phase of the Pala Empire. Now the same mistake happens, which happens with many great empires: strong empire, but weak successors. Rulers like Vigrapala I, Narayanpala, Rajyapala, and Gopala to come to power. But these rulers were not as influential as Devapala. Slowly local powers began rising again, administrative control weakened, and pressure on the borders increased. But the story does not end here. Another turning point comes in history when an attempt is made to revive the Pala Empire. And this attempt is made by Mahipala I. He was an important ruler who tried to recover lost territories, strengthen administration again, and revive the empire to some extent. But what was the problem? This revival was not permanent. Old enemies still existed. The remaining power of the Gurjara Pratiharas in the west, the influence of the Rashtrakutas in the south, and later the rising Chola power. And internal weaknesses had not completely disappeared. After this come Naipala, Vigrahapala III, Mahipala II, and then Rampala, who is considered the last powerful ruler of the Pala dynasty. He tried to crush rebellions, bring back control, and stabilize the empire. For some time the situation improved, but now the ground reality had changed. This was the phase where the empire was no longer breaking from outside, but from inside. At the same time, a new power rises: the Sena dynasty under Vijayasena and later Ballal Sena. This was not a sudden invasion, but a slow takeover. Slowly they started capturing those regions where Pala control had weakened. And gradually, power in eastern India began to change. By the end of the 12th century, the Pala Empire had almost lost its political power, and the Sena dynasty replaced it. In other words, its end did not come from one great defeat, but from slowly weakening control, internal problems, and continuous external pressure altogether destroyed it. But the story still does not end here, because at the same time another major transformation was happening. Turkish invasions had begun in North India. Taking advantage of weak political conditions, invaders entered Bihar and Bengal. And then came a devastating turning point, the invasions of Bakhtiyar Khilji. In his campaigns, great centers like Nalanda and Vikramashila were destroyed, institutions where centuries of knowledge tradition had existed. But the story still does not end here, because at the same time another major transformation was happening. Turkish invasions had begun in North India. Taking advantage of weak political conditions, invaders entered Bihar and Bengal. And then came a devastating turning point, the invasions of Bakhtiyar Khilji. In his campaigns, great centers like Nalanda and Vikramashila were destroyed, institutions where centuries of knowledge tradition had existed. Just think about it. An empire that made knowledge and religion its identity, that influenced the world through soft power, but could not continuously sustain hard power, and in the end fell behind in the politics of power. Now the question for you, was the Pala dynasty a great empire, or an example that teaches us how costly mistakes can become? Tell us in the comments below.